everyone, welcome to my channel and to my studio where I want to share with you an experiment that I've just done. I am constantly talking about tonal values as one of the most important ingredients when painting, not just in soft pastel but in any medium. And in this video I want to share with you two tonal value studies, one in monochrome and one in colour. I'll show you how I put the tonal value information to use when choosing my colours. I hope that you'll find this helpful. Please do subscribe here on YouTube if you do. I have a ton of other videos on useful topics like this. And just before we get started, a huge thank you to all of you who have subscribed already, boosting me over the 50k mark this week. When I talk about tonal value, I'm talking about how dark or light something is. And if you work in a monochrome medium like charcoal, for example, you're dealing entirely with tonal value. But when you introduce colour, there is more than just tonal value to think of. Here's my reference image, which I took a few years ago in the south of Spain. I like this because it has some nice dark areas, lots of interesting mid-tones, and a small area of bright white to jump out at us. The range of tonal values looked interesting, and there are a few surprises. Just look at how dark in tonal value the red flowers are. In grayscale, they almost disappear. That's something I'll talk about a bit later in the colour study. But it was satisfying to focus on just tonal values by turning everything grayscale for this first study. I could have used charcoal for this one, but due to just a lack of nice drawing paper for that type of medium in my studio, I opted for shades of grey in pastel pencil and made use of a black paper. Because I used pastel pencil, I was able to choose 6 different values from black through to white. I also chose a similar soft pastel in my light grey value, just so that I could block in the biggest area in the piece a little quicker. Of course, even though I only have 6 values, I can mix lots in between by layering the greys or by using black or white to shade. I used a ruler to help when sketching out the window and the railings, which I realised later on were going to be a much bigger task than I imagined, and then transferred that sketch onto 2 pieces of black UArt paper. So I'll add just a little bit of time lapse to take you through the 2 studies. The first thing I'm thinking of with the grayscale study now is to come in with some of the darks, especially inside the window frame, all tricky little areas to work on, but I can use that black as a measuring point for all of my darkest values. Then pretty quick I actually bring in the light grey colour and block in the main section of the wall. The quicker I can get this big area blocked in, the easier it makes measuring all of my other values off of it. So with tonal value, it really helps me to get a few prominent values placed early on, and that helps me to measure all of the other values, making sure things are either lighter or darker than their neighbouring values. And you can see here I've got the pastel pencil that is a very similar colour to my soft pastel, and I can use that for all the intricate areas. So I decided to exaggerate the darkness of the main area of wall just a little bit, and this is why. So once I add this white section in, you can see that there's still a nice difference between the white section and the grey wall outside. And that's what I want. It's the contrast that I want. I don't have to stick exactly to the tonal values that I see in the reference. I can, for example, choose to exaggerate the strength of the shadows. You can see that the shadow of the balcony here, I'm going to affect that now by shading it a bit lighter, especially as we get further away from the source of the shadow.
And this is where I am using that technique of layering or shading with the greys and adjusting the tonal value of each little area. So the brightest flowers here, I can afford to come in with my almost brightest value. But for the red flowers and the green foliage, I really have to remember just how dark they actually are when you grayscale it. And I just bring in a few little highlights using the white. But you see that each time I get lighter in tonal value, I get a little bit more sparing with my use of that value. So a lot of the emphasis is put on the darker values. And then as I build up towards the highlights, my marks tend to get smaller. So I'm not really using much of my brightest value a lot of the time. And you can see that here where I start to bring in some highlights on the leaves and the flowers. But I'm all the time reminding myself just how dark these actually look in the reference. And that is something I will have to remind myself of when I'm working on the color version. But when you're used to working with color, it's definitely a little bit easier to just be choosing from a selection of greys without the color information there to complicate things. But hopefully now I can show you a few tricks in terms of the colors to help you make use of this tonal value information in your painting process. But this was a lot of fun to work on, a nice little break from working in colour all the time. If you'd like to work along with me, I will release both of these demos in real time over on my Patreon channel.
With the grayscale version done, now it's on to the colour. And just like with my greys, I'll need lots of tonal values within my palette. But now instead of greys, I need to inject colour. And one way I start to think about that is in terms of the colour temperature. Where I want cool shadow tones, I'm likely to sway towards the blues and blue violets. Where I want to inject some warmth, like in the sunlight, for example, I can use lighter tints of peaches and yellows. Instead of thinking about my colours from just dark to light, now I have little groups of colour, each with a selection of tonal values. A selection of greens for the leaves, blue violets for some shadows, reds and browns for the flower pot and flowers, and light warm tints. I would describe this row as mostly warm and this one as mostly cool. Choosing my colours, I'm thinking about all the different elements in the painting and then arming myself with a few different tonal values around those colour groups. I can still use pure black, which I often do. I can also, at the other end of the tonal value scale, I can still use pure white, which I do more sparingly. And just like with the grayscale version, I can still shade things darker or lighter using black or white. But I'm more inclined to layer up the colours now to affect both tonal value and colour temperature at the same time. See, once you start to affect a colour with either black or white, it really changes the chroma of the colour. It either dulls and greys it, or it tints it lighter.
Either way, the saturation or the chroma of the colour is reduced and it either appears greyed out and muddied or a bit washed out.
If we consider the red flowers, most vibrant colours are darker in tonal value than you might think. Going lighter in tonal value does not create vibrance. It's mostly in the medium range of tonal values where you'll find vibrance. And just to quickly mention, I'll also use pastel pencil in this to help with those intricate details. And my selection is just using a few similar colours as in my soft pastel sticks. It does not have to be exact, close will do. And apologies for the grubby state of my pastel pencils here, they have been put to a lot of use. Let's go through the painting process of this one so that I can talk a little bit about how I'm applying what I learned from the grayscale study.
So it's the same starting point, but this time I come in with some shadow color first. And this is grey 8 in my unison selection of colors. And I realized pretty quickly that I'm going a little bit too light on the shadows. I'm bringing in all sorts of purple tones. I'm making use of dark brown instead of the harshness of pure black. And then, just like before, pretty quickly, I'm getting some blocking in done on the main area of wall. Now, the colours that I come in with first, a very pale lilac. This is not pure white. This is a very pale lilac with a very pale peach tint over the top of that. And then you'll still see the contrast between the colour of the wall and the pure white on this very bright section just inside the window frame. And even though I do have enough contrast between that bright white section and the rest of the wall, at this stage I decide to darken some of my values, and here I am adding some extra dark purple into the shadow being cast by the balcony. And like I said earlier, rather than using black or some kind of monochrome grey, now I can use my colours to affect each other. And that works so much nicer, keeping some of the vibrance or the saturation of the colour intact. Now, just like before, I can use pure black. Here I am making use of the same black pastel pencil to help with some of the railings. I really underestimated these railings and what an effort they would take. That was very tricky. But I can get all of that black blocked in just like I did in the grayscale version. I also decided at this point to darken the wall just a little bit. So this is not the same light lilac from the beginning. I'm just one step darker in tonal value. And I did the same with the peach color as well. So I picked up two slightly different colors to darken the wall just a little bit, and here they are. So instead of creating a grey from just one grey colour, my wall colour comes from two quite contrasting colours layered up together. And for that reason, I can play about with the temperature of things. So if you look up towards the top left of the blank wall area, it looks a little warmer up there, just like it does in the photo reference. I'm also bringing in some warm colours in around the details in the window, especially on that little slither of sunshine that we see. I'm using the greens to build up the tonal values of the foliage in here. All the time I'm trying to keep in mind from my tonal value study that these areas are a little bit darker than you might think. Then I place a little bit of this pink tone in for the brightest flowers in the pot. Again, starting with something a little bit darker and then allowing smaller highlights to pick out some of the brighter light that's hitting it. So tonal value and studying tonal value really makes me aware of how light or dark I need to go, and that is often so helpful when choosing your colours. It's literally half the battle. And so I deliberated over the colours of the flowers, whether I wanted to bring this even brighter value in. So we've got a slightly darker red to make the main shapes of the red flowers. And then just a brighter red to pick out some parts of the flowers. So with everything that you're painting, you're going to need a few different tonal values for that one object. And here I've picked up my blue pastel pencil just to affect the colour of this shadow a little bit. Just like in my grayscale version, I'm lightening the shadow ever so slightly as it gets further away from the source of the shadow. Then coming in with tiny little bits of highlight. And of course the highlight for my red flowers is a very much mid-tone colour. So at this point, I decided to pause and compare my two studies. So here they are side by side. Let's just change these both into grayscale and see how far off I am. So I can definitely see that I've gone a good bit darker in some areas in the grayscale version, and I have enhanced more of the colour in the shadows in my colour version. So I don't just rely on tonal value to create nice contrasts. In the colour version, I can also make use of the colours or the temperature of the colours themselves to create extra punches of contrast. So I continue on now. You can see here I'm using some pencils in similar colours to my soft pastel sticks. And I can create some of the minor details like this and neaten up the edges. Then again with the plants at the bottom, I'm building up those dark areas that we can see in between the flowers and the leaves. I'm using pure black here, a little bit of the dark eggplant from Terry Ludwig as well, but mostly pure black. And just blocking where the flowers are using my darker red. Blocking in some of the foliage using my darkest green. And then building up to the lighter values gradually. And at this point, I'm very aware of how dark this area, all of this plant pot is in tonal value. So I really don't want to go too bright. Very sparing with these final highlights. And these final highlights are mid-tone colours all the way. Then just a few final little slightly brighter areas on the leaves, but again, so sparing with those brightest values. So I absolutely did take a little bit of artistic license with the colour version. I didn't feel the need to go as dark with the dark shadows just to create the contrast, because I feel like there's a little bit of warmth in the wall in the colour version, and that really is enhanced by the cool blue tones within the shadows. So you're relying on other types of relationships whenever you're working in colours, but the underlying tonal value relationships are the basis for the entire thing. And if you can get those close, that will really help your colour work.
So what are the main takeaways from this video? Well, you don't have to paint a grayscale study of everything first, although it is rather helpful. You could just have a grayscaled version of your photo reference beside you, as well as the colour one, to guide you while you're painting. Also, just like I did in this one, try taking a progress photo of your painting and turn it grayscale and then compare with your grayscale photo reference. This is so helpful during the process of painting, just to check your tonal values and to see if you're on the right track. I could do this same colour study again using slightly different colours, and as long as I get all of the relationships between the tonal values good, it will still look all right. There's a lot of wiggle room with your colour choices, but it's the tonal values as the foundation that make the painting work. If you're still struggling with colour theory ideas such as colour temperature or complementary colours, do check out some of my playlists here on YouTube, as I have lots of videos on these topics. But I hope that this at least gave you some ideas on keeping a check on your tonal values while you're painting. It really does make a big difference. Just to remind you, I will release both of these demos over on my Patreon if you'd like to work along with me in real time on one of them or even both of them. But I hope that you enjoyed this here on YouTube. Again, please do subscribe if you haven't already. I have tons of other videos and playlists all about soft pastel. But thanks very much for watching, and until next time, happy pasteling.